Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is an artist, a writer, a YouTube star, a crowdfunding sensation, and now, as of effectively exactly when this podcast debuts, a Substack creator. It's Elsa Charretier. Thanks for coming on, Elsa.
Hi. What a way to introduce me. Oh my God.
Every time we talk, you have like two more things I have to add to your intro.
Yeah, it's the hyphenated, generation.
I remember when I was growing up, fittingly, because right before we you talked to Entertainment Weekly. I remember reading an issue of Entertainment Weekly where I'm pretty sure they gave Matt Damon and Ben Affleck the Hyphenates of the Year award because they were writers, producers, actors, directors, whatever. I feel like you're kind of like the hyphenate of the year for comics.
I wouldn't say that. It's comics being what they are. A lot of people are kind of all over the place, like I am. So I don't think I'm unique in that sense at all.
I will say I recently did a feature where I talked to people about like the new path to where kind of comics are headed and like making comics as like a traditionally direct market oriented creator. And there was two people who were mentioned more than anybody else. One was Scotty Young and the other one was you. So apparently you were up there. You were on the tip of the tongue of your peers.
It's interesting. I think that Scotty Young has made a turn that's very different from what I've been doing. And it's much more merch oriented, which I think is great. I've been wanting to do that, but I haven't been able to. I don't think I'm very good at this. I don't think my art is the best for this, but Scotty's work totally is. So yeah, I would see why people would name him.
Yeah, his path is really interesting, and I do think merchandising is very valuable. But you do prints for your Patreon, don't you?
Yeah. I guess that's merch. Yeah, I guess. Prints I'm comfortable with. The rest, I've been trying to get into it, but I'm not there.
So we are recording this on Friday, January 28th. On Monday, January 31st, your new Substack comic, Love Everlasting, with writer Tom King, colorist Matt Hollingsworth, and letterer Clayton Coles, is being announced. This is a big change for you. I always like to ask when I talk to people right before things are kind of rolling out, like, how are you feeling? How are you feeling about this? Are you excited, nervous, a little bit of both?
I am. I'm very excited. I'm also very nervous because the launch of our Substack coincides with the launch of our book on the same day. Our Tom King's and my new book called Love Everlasting is available starting Monday for free.
Is it the whole first issue?
Oh, it's going to be the whole first issue, but every issue, every month is going to be free and available to everyone. I guess you didn't know that.
Well, you said it was going to be free, but I didn't know if it was going to be like a chapter or like the whole issue.
No. It's the entire comic, and for the every issue every month, it's going to be free.
You're blowing my mind right now. That's right? Amazing.
So yeah, I'm excited. I'm very impatient for people to finally read it because I started working on that comic about a year ago. Mm-hmm. So I haven't been able to show any of what I've been working on. And so it's finally the day.
I think that's really funny. It's one of those things where, to somebody like me, I'm like, where's her work? What is she doing? And you're like, I am so far into this comic, you have no idea. I just can't show anything. And that's the nature of comics, right? It's like you're always trying to like bank a bunch of work for when you release it. And then like sometimes that results in you just seeming like you've disappeared for like a year or something.
Yeah, I think people by now with, creator owned being more and more prominent and artists making sure that they have enough issues in the bank before launching. I think the readers know by now that when an artist is not showing any work, it means they're working on something big. So I don't think it's as much an issue as it maybe used to be.
Sure.
But the good thing that I have for me is YouTube.
Yeah.
We're putting videos out, so it doesn't look like I'm not doing anything. Although people might think that I'm just exclusively a YouTuber, which I'm not. I'm just, doing that on the side, and I still write and draw every day. But yeah, so now I can finally show what I've been doing.
I do think it's funny. Every single patron question I got was actually about your YouTube show.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah. I thought it was really interesting. Because I think the first time you came in the podcast, it was all about the comics. And then this time it was all about YouTube, which I thought was fascinating.
That's very, yeah, I love that actually.
Yeah, yeah. But okay, so we're here to talk about Love Everlasting. I'm going to get into the actual Substack part of it here pretty soon. But we have to start with what the book is. And as we discussed before, describing it almost cuts its legs out, so you can't go too much into it. But I will say this. I've read the first issue. It's very good. It's very surprising, both for just the idea of what it is in the broader scope of comics. Because fundamentally, I think one thing that you can say it is it's a romance comic at its heart. And that's like just not something you see a lot in modern comics. I'm curious as to how you're describing it. What is your go-to?
So I would say that it is definitely a romance comics. It's an homage to romance comics which sold millions and millions of copies in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and it's a new take on the genre. It's I think very unique take, which you might agree with.
I do.
And I think that we're broadening the potential readership. Because when you imagine romance, you're thinking, oh, that's for, women or young girls, all of that. First of all, I don't think it ever was, only for women. But Love Everlasting has such a different take on the genre that I think it, even if you're not into romance comics, you're going to find something that you love in that book. Mm-hmm. Because it's full of heart, it's full of action, it's full of twists and surprises. I've been loving Tom's scripts, and I think that readers will fall in love with our characters. Pun intended.
Were you a romance fan?
No, I never was.
Interesting.
Yeah, which was interesting for me because I was not a fan of superhero comics before I started drawing them. I think not being a fan of romance comics allows me to have some distance with the subject, with the tradition of the genre, and be able to come with my own take that actually fits the pitch of the book.
Mm-hmm. I can see that. I mean, it's interesting because I'm a huge, I've always loved romantic comedies. I have this huge weakness in me. Not a weakness. I mean, it's just I just love them. And ever since I was a kid, I always had this I think hopeless romantic side to me. So when I was reading it, I was like, oh man, this is actually something that I haven't seen before. And then when I got to the second chapter that's in the first issue, I was like, oh, this is definitely something I haven't seen before. And I think it's interesting because, again, not trying to get into spoilers, but the way I read it, it almost feels like it feels like what you described. It's like a romance comic or romance story by people who are traditionally outsiders to the medium or to the genre, because that's not something you generally something that appealed to you. It's something that you could have a fresh take on, mostly because it wasn't something that appealed to you before.
Yeah, exactly. And the goal that we have with the series, Tom's goal, is to kind of do for romance comics what Sandman did for horror. That's pretty much as close as I can get to describing it.
That is a pretty lofty goal.
I'm just trying my best.
Well, okay, so I do have to ask you. We'll get into how this came together, but if romance comics or romance in general doesn't necessarily appeal to you as a storyteller, what was the appeal of this project?
Well, first of all, Tom's writing. I knew that, so I reached out to him, and I knew that whatever he would offer or come up with as a story, I would love. I tend to, I reach out to writers whose work I really, really enjoy, and who I know can turn up something that I will want to draw, whatever it is. When he said, let's do a romance, I was like, okay, I guess I'm gonna do romance comics because you're writing it. I would probably turn down a romance comic by anyone else. And I knew he who do it differently. But and the specific angle of that book and how we're handling that romance twist has allowed me, creatively to do stuff that I had never done before, which is always what pulls me in. If you compare it to November, for example, which is I would say at the other end of the genre spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
It's for me, it's a way to push my limits, to try new stuff, and just working with a new writer in itself, there is a learning curve.
Mm-hmm.
And that by itself is very interesting to me.
I imagine all of that, like, working in a genre that you're not normally a fan of and working with a writer you haven't worked with before. That's the type of stuff that probably pushes you as an artist in really interesting ways, because you have to start looking at if you worked with Matt, let's say you worked with Matt for Action again, you have a familiar cadence with Matt. You have, probably similar interests to a certain degree, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
You have all these different overlaps, but with this, it's like you're coming in as like a stranger to all of this. And I imagine that type of stuff leads you to some pretty interesting positions or interesting gains for yourself as an artist you might not get otherwise.
Oh, totally. And what's interesting is, first of all, I come to Love Everlasting through Joan, our character. That's the what guides me.
Mm-hmm.
It's the characters. But in terms of, stretching different muscles and coming at it through a different, a new angle is, I hate looking for references. It's really something that I abhor. And you think, when you're doing some romance comics, there's gonna be some period stuff, some outfits that you have to look up and all of that. And I decided, screw that. I'm going to draw things as I imagine them. I don't care if they fit that or this or that period. So in a way, it's completely different from what I've been doing with Matt on November.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I mean, it seems like it's kind of free in a way.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And what I love about working, on creator-owned books is that unless the writer is telling me, no, that's not the right way to go, which never happens, I'm free to do whatever I want.
Yeah. I mean, from honestly, everything I've heard about Tom as like a collaborator, he seems like he's pretty open to artists just kind of doing their thing. I mean, he lets Mitch do whatever the hell he wants.
Yeah. I agree. He's just, you're the artist, do what you want to do. If it's a different take than what I had in mind, then it's absolutely, all for the better, because it's a collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
No, she's a great partner.
Yeah.
I never doubted that it would be any different, but he really is a great partner.
So not to be like a conspiracy theorist, but I remember when, I think it was your second art book Kickstarter you did, I remember you had like some tiers in there, or like maybe it was like bonus rewards or something, and one of them was with Tom. And I remember thinking, I was like, oh man, they're definitely working together.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's funny because that was, I'm trying to remember when it was. That was like towards the beginning of 2021, I want to say.
Yeah, we decided we were going to work together in October of 2020,
mm-hmm.
during the Kickstarter campaign, or right before it. And the book came out in January. The art book came out in last January, and we started working on Love Everlasting right about that time.
Wow! So it's been the process for a bit.
Oh yeah, every writer or collaborator that works with me on something is gonna end up either in one of my YouTube videos or one of my Kickstarter, and just rub them in.
I'm going to start breaking down all of your videos, being like, who is going to be working with Elsa in the future? Ed Brubaker? I'm very interested.
Well, full disclosure, Ed and I almost worked together.
Oh, honestly, that just makes too much sense. Because you like crime stuff, right?
Oh, yes. We just couldn't make our schedules work. But it will happen.
Someday. Okay, so you were working with Tom a while back. It was like, around that Kickstarter.
Mm-mm.
I know it's a comic through Substack. Here's the thing that I find interesting. Is it your Substack? Is it Tom's? Is it both of yours? How does it work? Because
It's
for listeners
yeah.
for listeners that don't know, Substack, and I'm just going to say how it's been working for other comic creators. They offer these Substack Pro deals, and these Substack Pro deals are grants to the creators whose names literally are on there as a publisher. At which point they get like, a grant to make the comics that they want. And it's like a lot of them are single creators. It's like Kelly Thompson has Black Cloak coming with Meredith McLaren, but it's Kelly's Substack. Whose is it? Or is it less clean than that?
It's ours. So what happened is that Substack reached out to Tom. They didn't know we had something in the works. And Tom said, okay, Substack reached out to me. What would you say about doing Love Everlasting on there? And I was like, okay, but I want us to be partner on this. I don't want to be, a freelancer that you pay to be on your Substack. Because first of all, I reached out to Tom in the first place. The reason that this project exists in the first place is I reached out to him. So I felt, I'm not going to be in the, I'm going to be in the co-driver's seat, if you will.
Right.
And Tom was like, yeah, I agree. Absolutely. If we're doing this together. So I think that initially Substack didn't, it wasn't possible, and we found a way to make it work. But yeah, it's both. It's ours. So our Substack is called Everlasting Productions,
Ooh.
and all things, all things Everlasting are going to be on there. In addition to Tom's projects that he will, not that he's going to produce new comics through Substack, but all the things that he does at DC, all of that, he's going to talk about that, and I will also talk about my side projects, all of that. But it's primarily to talk about Love Everlasting.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point to raise, because one of the issues that I had with the Substack at first was it was very writer centric, and as a I see myself more as an artist than I do as a writer, but I don't see myself as a less than
Yeah.
creator. And comics tend to be very writer centric. Or right now, it used to be different in the past. So to me, it was very important, and I wouldn't have done it differently.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the interesting things, is that a lot of them are, like you're saying, it's like primarily it has been writers. And when it's not writers, it's normally cartoonists who, write, artists who also write.
Which is not to say that the way that the other writers have done it is unfair
Right.
to their collaborators. Not at all, because I with the grant, I think it's pretty public that they are paying their freelancers and paying above DC or Marvel rates. So it's not unfair at all. It's just, as myself, a creator, if I'm doing something like that, I want to co-own the thing, if you will.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And like you said, you came in reaching out to Tom, so it makes sense you'd want to be equal partners. Also, it like totally fits with everything else you're doing, because it's like we talked about last time. It seems like a lot of what you've been doing has been built around, I'm trying to think of a way to say this that doesn't sound like personal brandy, but like, something, you've been trying to build up, activating your audience in the stuff that you do, rather than like specifically in one comic or something like that. And so if you're kind of like the sub headliner versus the headliner, then that kind of takes away from it a little bit and doesn't really fit what you're doing. But I mean, it just makes sense too. It's just like, it's a Tom and Elsa project, and you might as well have both names up at the top.
Yeah, I agree.
So what, you sound like you had a little skepticism at the start, just because the writer part, not necessarily working there, but just when it was first announced. What appealed to you about taking your talents to Substack? Was there something freeing about that, or was it mostly just it was a really good offer?
A little bit of both. I'll be honest. So it's a new way of connecting with our audiences, which is always very interesting to me. I love finding new ways to talk to people, to talk about the craft of comics. And what appealed to me was also the long form essays that you get to write on a newsletter, which is, I think, the ideal way of sharing your ideas about craft and comics and all of that. I also liked the idea of us being able to put our book for free out there. I mean, that's a huge, Tom and I want this book to be read by as many people as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, having it free helps a lot. And I don't know, it's a new adventure. And you put something right like that right in front of me, I'm going to jump on it.
Yeah.
Because I'm just curious to see what can be done with this.
And now, a quick word from one of off-panel sponsors. Macroverse is a next-generation digital comics platform, and one with an astonishing number of comics, with currently over 50 series from over 100 creators on their app, with a 5-star rating both on Apple and Google's app stores. Download the app and binge all their titles, including the Eisner-nominated Remind from Jason Brubaker, Lisa K. Weber's Hex 11, which has been described as Harry Potter meets Blade Runner, or the new queer supernatural adventure series Husk that launches on November 1st. It's just $4.99 a month to subscribe to Macroverse, with proceeds directly supporting the creators on the platform. Keep an eye on the future of Macroverse 2, as 2022 is going to bring an epic upgrade that offers a new level of digital collectability and more, with early adopters able to sign up for more information at macroverse.com. And now, back to the show. That's one of the things I think is interesting is, like, if you look at all the current Substacks, you look at, somebody like Chip Zdarsky has, like, regular comics. He has Public Domain comes out every Friday, and then I think he has Kaptar. I don't remember what day it comes out, but Kaptar with Kagan McLeod that comes out every week as well. And there's like a familiar cadence to it. There's regular beats. I think James Tynan's like the same way. But then you look at something like Three Worlds, Three Moons from Jonathan Hickman, Mike Del Mundo, and Mike Huddleston, and that thing is just like, you get a different flavor every single day of the week. Like one day it's going to be a live stream. The next day it's going to be like a process post from one of the mics. The next day it's going to be like a breakdown of the economics of this larger world, or universe as it may be. And so there's so many different ways you can approach it. Do you feel like when the Substack part of Love Everlasting came together, did that change how you wanted to approach? You were already well into the comic, it sounds like, so you weren't reinventing the wheel there. But did it change how you wanted to approach the overall storytelling aspect of it and what you can do with it?
No, it didn't. But going back to what you were saying about the different Substacks, I think it's interesting now that they have been live for a few months now, to see that they each have found their own little niche and ways of doing Substack. It's very different from one to another, like you said. And we're just starting. We haven't found our niche. I think it will take a few weeks, maybe a few months, to really understand what we can, how we can really make the best of that Substack. Mm-hmm. So I'll be honest, we haven't found it yet, but it's going to take a discussion with the subscribers. It's going to take us getting comfortable with the platform. So I don't know how different it's going to be from the other Substacks. It hasn't informed the book in itself, but it's definitely going to inform about how we're going to talk about the book, mm-hmm. and the craft of making it.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things is like, you don't really know what it is until you kind of open it up, because then you find out not to say that everything is going to be dictated by the subscribers and everything, but you're going to find out a lot about what people respond to. I mean, that's one of the things I've been surprised to hear as I've talked to Substack creators is it seems like a lot of them have been surprised by what drives interest. It's like, yes. Is it the comic? Is it behind the scenes stuff? Is it process? Each one is completely different, and you just kind of lean into it. Not in like a craven fashion, but it's just like you start figuring out what people really want from what you do. And it's fascinating because all these people are fundamentally similar. They are comic book creators, but it seems like what one person wants from Jonathan Hickman is not the same as what they would want from Kelly Thompson, and
absolutely.
et cetera.
That's what I find fascinating, is that you're looking at certain creators, certain things that you are that wouldn't be the same for another creator. And I think um, going back to what you just said, it is going to be subscribers who are gonna decide what kind of content we put on there, because you just look at the engagement and you're gonna do the post that get more and more engagement. It just makes sense. Why keep doing stuff that have less engagement? So it's the behavior of people on that newsletter that is going to inform the kind of content we're going to put in there, in a way.
Yeah, you don't want to just keep putting stuff up that nobody cares about.
Yeah, right. It's interesting because on my Patreon, the Patreon that we have to support the YouTube channel, I started doing transcripts because I thought people could be interested in reading, slowly what we're going over and maybe understand it more, because a video goes by really fast, especially when you're talking about something that's technical. And I thought people would love this. It turns out the engagement in the, really, really low. I was surprised by that. So who knows what we're going to find out on Substack? I don't know.
That's funny. I've actually had a number of people request over the years that I do like basically text versions of my podcasts. And transcribing is miserable, and paying for it would eventually become pretty expensive. But I'd considered it. It is fascinating to hear that, though, because it's one of those things that you really do think that people would respond to, like a text version of something that's audio or video.
Yeah.
And
it turns out none at all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but who knows? I mean, just because how weird this stuff is, maybe because yours is video and mine is audio, maybe people would respond completely differently if I did it. I don't know. So I think one of the most interesting things about all of this is something that you had mentioned earlier. And you'd mentioned earlier via email to me, but I don't think it sunk in what exactly you'd meant, which is that it's free, that Love Everlasting itself will be free. Yeah. I think that's really interesting because when it comes to Substacks, traditionally, I believe that most outsiders would expect the draw to the Substack to be the comic itself. You're making that free. So that draw to subscribe is not necessarily there. Why did you guys end up deciding to do, I mean, obviously you want as many people to read it as possible, but why did you decide to make that free?
So first of all, because we want, like you said, the wide audience, and because in terms of added value, we have a lot of things that we're going to offer on there, like podcasts, variant covers, Zooms, physical rewards, exclusive Substack covers, exclusive editions, prints, all of that. That's going to be only available on Substack. That is going to be available for a fee. Mm-hmm. And it's a choice that we made to have the book available to everyone. And if you're curious about how we made this book, or if you want a physical variant copies that's going to be really rare, then you can pay for it, So it's a different approach than I guess you would imagine for something like Substack, but it's something we're trying, and I think it's gonna work out like we think it's gonna be.
Mm-hmm. Did that come just from discussions between you and Tom, or did part of that come from discussions with the people at Substack, other creators who are working on it, things like that? Have you learned things about how things have been working on Substack, or is it mostly just like, this is how you want to do it?
A bit of both. I think that when they suggested the idea, we were like on board really quickly, because it just made sense to us to do it that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do think it's interesting, though, because it reminds me, what you're doing reminds me of how webcomics have worked for a long time, in that a lot of webcomics, what they, like, you look at something like even like XKCD or like Strange Planet or something like that, and those comics are free to read, but because people become big fans of the comics and they become big fans of the creators and everything they're doing, what happens is they really end up making money off of like merchandise or off of like physical products that come out of it, things like that. And it's almost like the comic exists as kind of like the rallying point, and then everything else is like what you kind of use to like fund everything that you're doing. And I don't know. I mean, I like that you all are approaching that, both because that means I got to read it for free, but also because like if I decide I really want this print that you've done, or if I want to listen to this podcast, I can always, take my what was it? Everlasting Incorporate. Wait, Everlasting. What was it?
Everlasting Productions.
Everlasting Productions. I could take my Everlasting Productions experience to the next level, and that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, that's definitely it. It's people can get to read it for free, but then they can decide, I have the money to support them. Either I want to support them because I want this thing to keep coming, or I have found a reward that I'm really interested in. I'm going to pay for that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you said, a lot of webcomics have done that. Look at the huge successes on Kickstarters. It's all for graphic novels or books that were available online for free. And yet people want to support, they want their physical copies. All of that is a way for readers that get it for free to still support the creators that they enjoy, whose work they enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other thing too is so much of fandom today is like engaging with one thing once or twice or three times, but then taking that fandom to the next level by engaging with like the creators directly, or finding ways to like celebrate it with like shirts or prints or this or that. And I feel like this approach is different from your peers on Substack, but it is very akin to the paths of some of the most successful stuff we're seeing today.
Yeah, I agree. And I'd be curious to see how it's going to go, in the future, if other creators are going to join that model, or if they're going to stay on the paid, subscription model.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I get the impression that everybody's just basically studying each other at this point.
Yeah. Like with everything new, everyone's looking at what the others are doing.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, I really like what Ryan Stegman and Donnie Cates are doing, or I really like what Molly Ostertag is doing. So you just start studying that stuff and trying to figure out what's working and what isn't. It is interesting, though. Like, I wonder if the further you get in, you start realizing that, like you said, like you're going to pay attention to what people respond to. I wonder if it's going to kind of give you some carte blanche to take swings that you wouldn't normally. Like maybe you find out everybody really wants, like, I don't know, a Joan plushie. I don't know why they would, but it's just like a random idea. Like maybe that's something that people want. Maybe that you would do things because of this that you would never have considered because fan interaction, because of the feedback you're getting, because this, that. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting how it could shift things for you.
Well, definitely. I think that when you enter these sorts of things, these sorts of experiment, you've got to go in there open-minded and being ready to change the plan if need be. So I'm fully expecting to be surprised by how things go. I'm fully ready to answer people's silly, wants and questions. And if they want a Joan plush, they'll get a Joan plush. But yeah, definitely you have to be be ready to take things a different route.
Yeah. Yeah, you gotta be flexible. And I do think it's really funny because like pretty much everything you've done as of late is almost like a training ground for everything that could possibly come up for this. Like, I feel like
I'm ready.
Seems like you are very ready for this. Okay, so I do want to talk about like the what you're doing with the comic in specific, because you told me via email that you have the first issue done. I know that because I read it. Which suggests your phrasing, though, I thought was really important. You described it as the first issue, which suggests to me that you view it in at least semi-traditional ways. Was there a plan, or is there a plan to release Love Everlasting in print, or is this like the one place it's going to exist, at least in the current state?
There will be a print release, not for a while though.
Gotcha.
But yeah, there will be a print edition. And I haven't said it before, but Love Everlasting is going to be an ongoing series.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to be doing this for a while. But there's going to be a significant lead way on Substack.
I'm just imagining you releasing it on Substack and then you kickstart a special print edition and then releasing it in print via comic shops and then bookstores. And then the whole process is showcased on your YouTube channel. That would be like the perfect storm of all of the things that you do.
Yeah, triple threat.
Exactly. It's the hyphenate all over again.
Yeah, it's with these sorts of thing, you have to make sure not to do too much. Not cannibalize your own work, and end up to a point where people are just tired of it.
Yeah.
So some projects will work for YouTube, others will work for Substack, will work for Kickstarter projects. I don't think you want to do everything with every project. First of all, I think I would get tired of it.
Yeah.
Anyway, but working across media is something that creators are focusing on. So I don't think why we wouldn't.
Right. Well, another thing too is there's been a lot of, I feel like there's an understanding to a certain degree that digital readers and print readers sometimes are separate. And that like there's some people who would only read in print and there's some people who would only read in digital. And so you're not exactly cannibalizing your audiences by doing both. It's finding your audiences by doing both.
Yeah, yeah. And when you get to read a comics like 9 months before it comes out in print or a year before it comes out in print, you have the first experience of reading it digitally. Then you have the experience, which is very different, by reading it, in a book, holding it in your hand. It's just different.
Mm-hmm. How far along in the comic are you?
Issue 5 right now.
Dang. Wow. Good call getting an early start.
I've been too slow. In a year, I should have at least 9 issues done. But I've done 2 Kickstarters.
I was going to say, you're pretty busy.
Yeah, I get, sidetracked. I don't know. I'm very bad at resisting my creative impulses.
I'm not going to say anything about the book in specific because, again, like specifics are kind of like detrimental to the reading experience. Mm-hmm. I will say this one thing. The final page is perfect. Absolutely perfect. It's funny. It's genuinely funny. Like when Joan realizes what's going on, or just like when she realizes her current plight, it genuinely made me laugh out loud. I think it was the final panel too, where she's like reacts, and it's just it's really good. It's like, I don't know. As I kept reading, I was just like, oh geez, I know where this is going. And then I got to that final panel, and I was just like, oh, this is going to be good stuff. But
to anyone listening to this right now, Love Everlasting issue 1 is free right now, and you just heard what David said. So you have to go on Substack. You have to check out that issue just to see that last panel.
Yeah, it's so
to
good.
Get an idea of how you can bend the genre of romance just for that. Have a look.
Can I also want to say one other thing about this. One of the nice things is with comics, one of the frustrating parts about it is like you have this new comic announced, and then it's going to come out in 3 months, or it's going to come out in 6 months, or a year.
Like we're short-circuiting the traditional comics. It's just such a hassle. I hate having that. Because the way it's set up, you allow the enthusiasm to like go down, or with what we're doing, people are going to be so pumped and they get to read it right now.
Yeah.
And that's great.
I can say it's awesome. And then people who listen to this can literally open a window on their computer and go and read it right then for free.
We'll be waiting.
Yeah. I mean, that's beautiful though. I mean, that's one of the things that I think comics is often missing is there's always this distance between hype and actually reading the comic. And like this, like you said, short circuits it.
Definitely.
So why do you are somebody who does a lot of different things. You have many hats. You're hyphenated, as we talked about earlier. Why do you think Substack is so appealing to comic creators? Because it seems like it's attracting a lot of big people for, I don't know, varying reasons, clearly.
So let's be very honest. There's the program aspect that can't be taken out of the equation. So there's that, of course, but there's also the potential of having that platform as a significant, side business, or something that can sustain financially creators. And as freelancers, I mean, that's what you want. You want to be able to make a living of doing things as freely as possible. And of course, um, platforms like Patreon or Substack are um, allowing creators to do that.
Hmm.
So it's a natural fit for comic book creators.
Absolutely. I mean, it's kind of just funding the work that you already planned on doing
Yeah.
and giving you more runway to do it without having to murder your. I mean, like, if you didn't have Substack, you might be like 9 issues into it and you might be like a basket case because you're so exhausted.
Yeah, exactly. And also, one thing that's interesting is that you can't take out the dynamic effect of having everyone going there at once.
Hmm.
It creates, first of all, readers are now aware of it. Whereas if you've got one or two, three creators going on Patreon, it kind of gets diluted.
Right.
Right now, everyone's that, a big creator or a lot of big creators are going on Substack. So it shines a light on what's happening there,
Hmm.
and you want to um, bank on that
Yeah.
as a creator. So it's, of course, it's a huge plus if readers get into the habit of looking in Substack to see what new creators is going up there or what they're doing. It's a new ecosystem of creating comics.
Yeah. Ideally, what happens is it's like a rising tide that lifts all ships. It's like somebody who goes
Yeah.
there for your stuff, checks it out, and they're like, "Oh, hey, maybe I'll check out this stuff by Kelly Thompson, or I'll check out this stuff by I don't know, Saladin Ahmed." And like next thing you know, there's like an area of effect where a user is describing or is discovering comic creators they wouldn't have read otherwise because they went on Substack. That's the hope, at least.
That's the hope. I have no idea if it's gonna, translate, or audiences are gonna cross from one creator to another. I've got no idea right now. I think it's too soon to tell.
Yeah. Yeah. So does working with Substack affect your other efforts? Like, are you keeping your Patreon and YouTube and everything going?
Oh yeah, 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 absolutely. And I'm going to release today, a Patreon posting. What's up with the Substack? Does it change anything on Patreon? It doesn't change anything. The Substack is Tom's and mine. The Patreon is Pierre's and mine. It's to fund or partly fund our YouTube channel efforts, the gear that we buy, all of that. It doesn't change. One of the big things that we have on Patreon is the mini prints, the monthly mini prints, and that's going to stay exclusive to Patreon. Nothing similar is going to be offered on Substack. The content is going to be different. It's two different entities, but I can see how people would say, "Oh, she has both." I do.
Well, no, it's less that. It's more like I kind of got the impression that when Substack brings people on, they kind of want to consolidate their presences onto Substack. And I wasn't sure if that was something that they were like, could you do that? And
Oh my God, that would have been a hard no. No, no,
understandably.
yeah, no, they never asked something like that.
And now, a quick word from one of off-panel sponsors. That sponsor is Bad Idea, and I keep asking Bad Idea what I should say here, and they keep saying wing it. So, hey, Bad Idea. Find their comics, I guess. And now, back to the show. I have to say, as I mentioned earlier, I had a number of Patreon questions about YouTube related things. So I think there's a lot of people who are breathing a sigh of relief when they're doing it. So, okay, let's go into some questions from that. Rent Narb Studios Comics asked about, when you're like teaching and talking about your process on YouTube and also just kind of breaking everything down, do you feel like you're learning more about your style yourself as you do it?
Oh, definitely. So what we've been doing so far on YouTube is more dissecting other people's work
Right.
rather than mine. And that's helped me clarify some concepts, about comics, about storytelling. It's pushing me, kind of making me, because when you're not doing videos or having to put videos out, it's always, learning is always in the back burner or at the bottom of your to-do list. Since we launched, I've got no choice.
Yeah.
I've got to do the research. I've got to, dig deep into other people's work, and I've learned, sorry, a huge amount of stuff since we started. Like on the Deadly Class case studies that we did, I was looking at one of Wes Craig's page, and I knew there was something on that page that was unique and really interesting. I just didn't know why. If I had been just reading the book, I would just maybe stayed 5 seconds on there and then flipped the page and kept on reading. But since I had to break it down, I really had to understand, why is this page seeming like it's different. It took me 2 hours, and I figured it out, why it was so interesting. So from there, I was able to extract or distill some concepts that I can use now in my own work. So definitely, one of the primary motivations to do that channel is, yes, to share it with others, but also for me to get better at my craft.
Yeah. I have to say, I appreciate you touting Wes Craig on there, because I think people have kind of slept on just how amazing Wes Craig is in Deadly Class. Like, it really, honestly, over the last, I don't know, what is it, 6-7 years, just an absolutely astonishing run by Wes Craig.
Incredible. The variety of his layout, of his storytelling, it's just one of my favorite books, and I'm not saying this lightly. I adore this series. I really do.
Yeah. I mean, Wes, I remember I did an interview with him at Emerald City Comic Con one year, and it was basically everything I could do to not just like turn into a total fanboy and be like, how are you so good? I'm like, that's not actually a useful question, but I kind of wanted to just ask it because that was basically what was in my mind. I was also, when I first introduced myself, cosplaying as J. Jonah Jameson from Spider-Man comics, so it was probably a very confusing experience for Wes overall. But well, and another question actually tied in perfectly to this, because Scott Hazelwood was wondering whether doing these YouTube case studies has led to you applying any of your learnings to your work. It sounds like the answer to that is yes.
Yeah. And I don't think it's well, first of all, it's pushing me to just take that extra couple of hours to work on a page, because I have seen what other people do. I understand why it's so good. So I should make, that extra effort. I feel a sort of responsibility now that I know all these things to push myself. And in terms of how I apply, what I apply, it's more on the atomic level.
Mm-hmm.
It's in my cells. I couldn't tell you this I do different now. I just know that my the resources I have are getting larger and larger, like a library of things that I know.
Yeah.
And I don't always know how I made this page better. It's just little by little, it's getting better.
Yeah. It's like you're in the Matrix, and instead of saying I know Kung Fu, it's just like all of a sudden you're like, I understand Wes Craig's perspective on this, or something like that. And you don't bring it up as a natural or as like a like you're deliberately doing it. It's just something that's there. I mean, that's one of the things. Yes. It's like whenever I talk to people about influences, I think people will expect influences to be a very specific, precise thing. And that's just not what it is. It's just something that kind of
so much more complicated.
Yeah, it's just something that kind of helps you form your voice. And it's not like you're going to call up like Wes Craig as like an influence. It's just going to be something that's there, and you don't even necessarily know how.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Okay, so the next question, Don Liebold is very excited about like...
Oh, hi, Don!
Yeah, very excited about the Inktober Kickstarter, but wondered... apparently he's worried that you're not going to be doing enough work. Wondered whether there will be a third art book.
Oh my God. No, not right now. I wish.
I will say he didn't know that there's a Substack coming, so he probably was like,
yeah,
maybe she's not doing stuff. And you're like, no, she's very busy.
Kickstarters are so draining. We're just wrapping up the Kickstarter that we did for our Inktober mini graphic novel, and it's so, every time I forget. It's like, with giving birth. I've never given birth, but I imagine you have one child, then you forget how horrible it was to give birth, and then you have another. It's like, oh, I remember now. It's kind of the same with Kickstarters.
Is there
I
like a
forget from.
recovery period? Like you need like
Oh
a
yeah,
month afterwards?
yeah, definitely. Like for the following 6 months, I'm like never again, and then I get they pull me back in. Yeah, I don't know. There will be a third art book, just not right now. First of all, I don't have any material. All I've been doing is drawing comics, so I don't have any commissions done or anything like that. I have, taken a bunch of commission requests. So I have like maybe 20 or 30 commissions to do by the end of the year. So I guess that's my first step in, accepting the idea that there's going to be a Kickstarter at some point down the line.
You have to emotionally prepare yourself and prepare
Yeah,
yourself
and
by making art.
I'm starting, doing commissions. Okay, it's a first step.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so to close, I want to talk about like your broader views on things. Like I mentioned earlier, I did that piece on kind of a new path for comic creators, and
Yeah.
I'd reached out to you for it. You were very busy for now extremely clear reasons. I do find your approach to be really interesting because it seems like, and we talked about this last time, that you keep looking in directions outside the traditional structures of comics. It seems like that is at least in part built on trying to make a more sustainable career for yourself, but also just because it seems like you're interested in finding different ways of getting your comics to readers faster, perhaps. But why is that a continued focus for you? Is it just you trying to broaden horizons, or a little bit of like skepticism about current structures?
Not really skepticism, because so first of all, most of the money I make is not gonna be from Patreon or YouTube.
Right.
So those are things that I do because we enjoy doing them. So the idea of doing all of that stuff is not to ensuring many diverse income sources. It's not that at all. I just enjoy trying new stuff out. I think it can be boiled down to this, really. It keeps me excited. Although I wanted, before the Substack, I wanted to get back to the basics and focus on comics, but I get offered something like that, and I just can't say no.
Right.
I get excited, and then yeah, that's how it is every time. But I think in terms of what we talked about, creators kind of having almost to do that right now if they want to sustain a career in comics. And I used to think that it was part of where the world was going as a whole. The gig economy. It's just part of the whole economy right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to think, if you're not able to do that, then it's too bad. But it's how comics are right now. It's got to be part of your toolbox to be able to do a Patreon, to do videos, to do all of that. And I've kind of changed my mind on that. If you are equipped with these tools and you like doing that, then it's great. Do that. But I think it's unfair to creators who are good, quote, only at making comics, or only want to focus on their comics work. I think it's unfair to them, the current state of things, because they're not going to be able to have as much visibility because they don't do all that other stuff. So I think, in a way, where some talents are going to be buried because they are only good at making comics, which is ultimately what counts.
Right.
But it's not really only what counts right now. So I don't know if it's that good to set in stone that to be a comic book creator, you also have to be a YouTuber, you also have to be a podcaster, you have to be a Substacker, all of those things,
Yeah, I don't, and that's the thing is like, I look at it as like a new path, but not the only path. It's like, it's a path you could take. And I think a lot of it comes down to personal interest. Because if I remember correctly, like part of the reason why you did the first art book was you were just interested in learning how to do InDesign, basically.
Yeah.
And then when you did the YouTube stuff, you're like, okay, I'm gonna do all this video editing myself and do all the video editing and do all like the video stuff because you wanted to learn about that. And you have that curiosity. And like, I'm guessing you're gonna be very curious about like writing long form stuff here pretty soon because like it sounds like something you're gonna be doing for the Substack. Yeah. I don't know if it's necessarily detrimental to not have those skills because a lot of people have built viable careers without that, and it's possible to do so. It's like I'm trying to think of somebody who's doing that right now, and I'm completely coming up blank, which is not useful. But at the same time, it's like I don't know. I mean, I think that it's helpful to have multiple paths because not everybody's built the same, if that makes sense.
I think it's a way for me also to see what sticks. I never expected Kickstarters to get that big, but our Kickstarters make for maybe half of our income every year.
Right.
Never expected that. Who knows? Maybe YouTube someday is going to be huge for us, financially. Right now, it's not the case, and it's not why we're doing it. But it's also, I think, an avenue to explore. So it's also about allowing ourselves to open up those opportunities and be ready if it sticks.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to what you were saying about what you're going to do with the Substack content, where it's like. You don't know what it's going to look like because to a certain degree, the response is going to shape what it looks like for you going forward. And I imagine that's the case for all the experimentation stuff you've done, where it's like, if you had literally 0 backers on Kickstarter and it was just, you were a mess the entire month of that, you wouldn't do another one. I mean, you barely want to do another one and you were very successful with that. I imagine like as you're doing all this experimentation and kind of figuring out things, it's like there's some things that work and there's some things that don't, and you carry the things forward that do work because you now know that's what people respond to.
Yeah, totally. And there's also it's completely that. You're totally right. So we'll see how where the Substack takes us. I'm excited to see how it's gonna, the shape it's gonna take, because right now it's just beginning.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's gonna be a fun Monday for you, I feel.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Tell me about it. I'm half dreading, half excited.
Are you and Tom, are you guys just gonna like chat all day and just like, I don't know. It's just interesting because like crowdfunding is so fascinating. I imagine like when you rolled out your first art book, you were probably like, God, I hope this gets funded. And I think it got funded really fast.
Oh yeah, we got funded in like 4 minutes. We had like I think 10K in 4 minutes, and for the Inktober that we did, we got I think 30K in like 20 minutes. It was huge.
That's
yeah. So
amazing.
You're wondering how it's going to go on Substack? I don't know.
Well, no, but I mean, it's just interesting because I imagine like that's one of the things with crowdfunding is like, let's say if you rolled out Love Everlasting as a comic that was going to be coming out in like, I don't know, May, and like it was announced today or something, or on Monday. It was announced on Monday for comic shops to order and everything like that. You wouldn't know like what its orders were until it got to final order cutoff. But in this case, or like in Kickstarter, you know instantaneously how people are reacting. And so that's one of the things I think is really interesting is like the live look. And I imagine like for you and Tom to a certain degree, as that's kind of going, as it's rolling out, there's going to be like, it's going to be, I don't know. It's like, do you look? Do you not look? I don't know what you do.
Oh, I'm going to look. You can trust me to have an eye on that thing the entire day.
I love it. Okay. Well, Elsa, I wish you the best of luck with Love Everlasting and everything else you do. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about it, and your always expanding profile of projects you have going. Thank you for taking the time.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with artist Elsa Charretier. You can find Charretier on the Love Everlasting Substack, on Patreon, and on YouTube. Love Off Panel, want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts today and give the show a rating or review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing it on Patreon. Find the show at patreon.com/offpanel. And when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast as well as weekly content and more. Want even more? Subscribe to my subscription comic site, Sketched, at sketch.com for long-form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content and its members-only forum. You can find Off-Panel and Sketched on social media by liking it on Facebook at /Sketched. That's SKTCHD. Follow on Twitter and Instagram at SketchComic or following me at @SliceFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Patrick Coyle, Devin Fitzsimons, Rom V, Nick Walker, Isaac Warren, Scott Carpenter, Rent Norbs Studios Comics, Nicholas Palmieri, Capes and Tights Podcast, Klaus Van de Ven, Brian, Submit Industries, Raj Patel, Jack Mulqueen, Kyle, Carl Kerschel, Robert Masella, Elsa Charretier, Luke Nakashoji, Elliot Metz, Dr. Lou, Scott Hazelwood, Scott Buwan, Michael Tunk, Canadian by Proxy, Johnny Cannon, Bradley Rader, Carl Troy, Brandon DePillis, Patrick Brower, Declan Shalvey, Dan Garino, Josh Williamson, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Brian Klein Q, SB, Nick Bennett, Daniel Whitfield, Susanna Polo, Reed Hinckley Barnes, Mario Tiambang, AbductedTheComic.com, Andrew Carita, Matt Mahoney, Charlie Chu, Stephen Hall, Pensacola Pop Comics, Kim Eslin, Philip Myra, Christian Shelton, Kenny Porter, Chris Pachalo, Torrin Gruenbeck, Fuzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Waltz Comics and Books, Carl Mizell, Danny Ollie, Paul Salates, Akil Wilson, Alex Demetriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Alistair Ross, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Reinwan, Vita Ayala, Tara Ferguson, Dave Slusher, WMQ Comics, Akil Kokachi, Sean Pinello, Ken Heidelman, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, David Kelly, Robert Wilson IV, Nick Polito, Brendan Fletcher, Jonathan Nilsson, Matthew Groom, Jason Massey, Adam Bogert, Matthew Taylor, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendrick, Steve Anderson, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Adam Highfield, Fiona Staples, Mark Abnett, Michael Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comic Star in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off-Panel's theme song just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.